Hello again. This is Bill Lindeman with Carrie Sluter, and we're here with the Believers Business Center show. And Carrie's going to talk about her books, Awareness and Living the Promises. And awareness is about Morgellons disease, which is something, it's very serious, a very serious parasite. Few people know about it, and you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy, because it's an experience. It almost ended her life. And Carrie, do you want to take it from here?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, Bill.
All right.
Yeah, Morgellons disease is like a science fiction disease of the skin and of the body that is, they're believing that it's a parasite contamination.
Right.
And nobody is really diagnosing it as such, but yet there's proof in the research and the studies that is indicating that that is correct. I had Morgellons, broke out with it, as we talked about last week.
Right,
To pick up
right.
where we left off last week. And I developed Morgellons disease overnight. One day I was fine, working, running a business, 32 employees. My world was in control. Everything was just wonderful. You know, I thought I had the world by the tail.
Yes.
And the next thing you know, I came home from work and I sat down after dinner and did the dishes and sat down on the couch across the room from my husband, and I noticed I had what felt like slivers in my fingers. Thought maybe I picked them up somewhere at work. So I did the normal thing. When you've got slivers or there's something poking you and it hurts, you go in and get a needle in the tweezers and try to get it out.
Sure.
And from that very moment, my world went into a science fiction nightmare for the next 2 years. And it only got worse every day. As I tried to pull those fibers out, or those pieces out of my skin, they would move away from the needle. And as I was trying to get them out, it would actually pull back. And they were just the weirdest things. They seemed really strange at the time, but I had never heard of anything like that, never experienced anything like that. So I'm just going after them, trying to get them out.
Yes.
And they seemed so weird. And I finally got a hold of one of them and pulled, and it sent a tingling up my arm and right through my body, like it was attached to every nerve in my body when it came out. And it looked like a spider's leg with little feelers going off of it in every direction. And it was just the weirdest thing. And there was another one in there. And so anyways, by the time I got it out, my husband came across. He said, "That is the weirdest thing I've ever seen."
How long was it?
It was maybe that long.
That's
on
all.
that one, and it was black. And it just,
And it affected your whole body when you pulled it out?
felt like
Wow.
it was attached to every nerve in my body. I felt it go tingle right up my arm and through my body. It was the weirdest sensation I had ever felt in my life. And at that very moment, my husband and I discussed how strange it was. And so I determined I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to go
Yes.
have the doctor check this out, So it was still in the early evening, because we worked till 3 in the afternoon. Doctor's office was open till 6. And I took note of the time and went in and called my doctor's office. I had a family practitioner and a family doctor that we were real close with.
Yes.
And called him up, and I said, "I have got the strangest slivers in my fingers." And I said, I need you to see them. I need to come in. Well, so I made an appointment for first thing the next morning. That evening, when I was taking my shower, I got out of the bathtub and I was drying off, standing in front of the mirror and drying off, and I noticed that there was a little piece of the stuff in my collarbone right here. And as I was wiping it, as I went like that, and I looked, and it was actually sticking out of my collarbone, like the slivers in my hand.
Yes.
And I noticed it because I felt it. So they were pretty painful. And so when I went to the doctor the next morning, I didn't try to get that one out. I left it, and I went to the doctor the next morning and showed it to him, told him about the ones in my fingers. So he surgically removed it. And at that point was when I realized how crazy that stuff was. Because as I was telling the doctor about it, he started trying to cut it, and he numbed it. He cut, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he cut, and he pulled, and cut, and he kept digging, trying to get it out. And it was right there on the surface. and it would move away from him. And he could not get a hold of it to get it out. And and the nurse was standing over him, standing there with him. They were having this conversation, just like my husband and my conversation from the night before, about how crazy it was and how strange this stuff was. That it is the strangest thing. They're both conversing back and forth how strange this fiber was. And he said, "This is the strangest thing I've ever seen." And the nurse spoke up and she said, "My God, it looks like it's moving away from you." And he finally got a hold of it. And I told him that when I finally got a hold of it, I had to grab it really fast and yank really fast, or it would, you just couldn't get a hold of it. So the doctor did that. He got it out, and he hurried down the hall. He was going to go check it under the microscope and look at it. And he described it as the same thing I had seen. And it was just like a black wiry thing with feelers, coming off of it in every direction. And he said, the nurse, she said, "I'll be right back." And she's chasing him down the hall, just flying down there to see what this stuff was. And as he described it to me, I'm listening to him, and I'm just, starting to get a little bit nervous. Well, it's just, at this point, it still seemed like just a fiber or a sliver, So he was explaining it to me, and he actually reached up on the table and counter and got a piece of paper and drew it for me, and drew it what it looked like under the microscope. And he said he was going to send me to a dermatologist. At that point, I made the appointment with the dermatologist, and it was a couple of days later. I was starting to get these things all over my body, and there started to be these red fibers and blue fibers. They were the color of my book, just a neon. As a matter of fact, the Morgellons book, awareness book, has a picture of them from the internet. That we, they're like a fluorescent type fiber, and they were long and just as thin as they could be. And they started coming out. These things started coming out from under my fingernails. Just over the course of a couple of weeks, I called my doctor back. He told me to go to the dermatologist. And this was the day I will never forget. I walked into that dermatologist's office, and when he walked in the door, I was sitting there, and he's reading in my papers, and he looked over at me. He said, "So what brings you here?" And I said, "I have these things coming out of my skin." And he looked at me, and he said, "Well, it's obvious you've been picking at yourself, and if you don't quit, they're never going to go away." My mouth just dropped. I couldn't believe that he treated me with such disrespect. That man didn't know me from Adam. At that point, I was a businesswoman. I had 32 employees. I dealt with business people, every single day. And I looked at him in just shock. And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "If you think that I would pick at myself and dig at myself, make myself look like this at 30 years, after 30 years of looking pretty good," I said, "You're crazy. I would not do this to myself. And if I am, I think you should help me." I could not believe the way I was treated. And that was my first experience with that kind of treatment. It only got worse from that day on. It was 2 years of searching and trying to find answers.
What an amazing story.
Then, of course, my husband saw it when it came out of my skin that day. He saw it. But then the next thing you know, he's going, "Carol, I think it's your nerves, I don't want to talk about it." We went through a battle, which the book talks about. It tells my whole story from day one of the experience. And, prior to that, I had the world by the tail. I had what you would think was a picture-perfect life.
Right, yes.
And my world was upside down and sideways and backwards from that moment that I found those slivers. I couldn't, every time you take a bath, the moisture in your skin would bring it to the surface. And so anyways, I lived with a tormented situation for about 2 years. And I'm a digger. I'm going to find the truth and what's causing this thing. And so I started research. I started looking for what's causing it. I'm going to the place where I worked and taking paint samples to the, and the insulation samples to the health departments. And, I went in and had some other skin grafts done where they took a sample of it and tested it. I even tracked down, I'm thinking after I'd been to all these doctors, nobody could give me any answers. I thought, well, the county coroner. My favorite show when I was a kid was Quincy.
Okay.
You know, I remember Quincy. I don't know
Yeah.
how many of these other ones out there will,
Mhm.
but Quincy was my favorite show, and he was a coroner, county
Right.
coroner. And he could figure out anything,
Sure.
and that stuff was strange enough that I just knew a county coroner would get to the bottom of it.
Mhm.
So little did I know at that time that he was actually just a doctor that worked for the community as a coroner. You
Yeah.
know, so he wasn't a Quincy.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
disappointed, but he wasn't. But what he did do is he saw, I took in the samples of the stuff that I had in baggies. I had these things in baggies and I would mark where it came from. If it would come out of my ear, they would come across my face and out my lip and just be dancing towards the mirror. And you could feel it. And all you have to do is go like this. And they would start moving. They would come to the surface of the skin and start coming out. They would leave sores and wounds that wouldn't go away.
You know, if you made this up, I would have a hard time believing it.
Well, yeah.
But yet,
You know,
it
a
happened.
lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of people
Yeah.
thought I was crazy.
Mhm.
But yet those same people, if I put them in front of me, in front of you, and said,
Uh-huh.
did you or did you not see this? And describe it,
Mhm.
they would say yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
But to ask them to describe what they saw, they would not do it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it was the fear of, you know, the craziness of it and them not wanting to sound crazy too.
Sure.
But
sure.
every single one of them would say, yes, I saw it.
Mhm.
But they would turn around, that same person would turn around and be talking about me to somebody else about how crazy I was getting. Well, I wasn't crazy before I got that stuff. And I did almost lose it. It was enough to really torment your brain, your mind. When you get out of the bath and you're drying and you've got things coming out of your skin, life wasn't mine anymore.
Yeah.
It really wasn't. And some of the things that I talk about in the book, one day in particular, I was vacuuming the house, cleaning up the house, and I noticed all of a sudden I had this line on my arm, right on the
Mhm.
front of my arm there, and it looked like a line of ink. Looked like somebody took an ink pen
Sure.
and wrote on
Uh-huh.
me, and I thought, what in the world is that? And I went to wipe it off, not realizing that it was this stuff, and it was still early on with it. And I wiped it like that, and it didn't come off, but it moved up my arm under the skin. I started trembling. Bill, you can't even imagine what
No, I
that
can't.
would do to your brain and to your mind and to your emotional side. It was an emotional torment. I started shaking. I remember it. I'm
Mhm.
sitting there just, what in the world is this stuff? This is in my body.
I think I would react like I must be losing my mind.
Yep,
You know.
yep, and you question it, okay, and I said that to myself, I said,
Yeah.
am I just imagining this, or did that really happen? And I'm thinking, so I'm looking at it, and I said, okay, let's see if it'll do it again. And I took my fingers, laid it on it, and moved it back up on my arm. And it moved under the, and it was not on the surface of skin, it was underneath the skin. And I mean, that's when I got really nervous, and, you know, I started getting more concerned about what is this stuff that is in my body.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, I thought, what would it do if and I thumped it.
Mhm.
Now, where your mind goes when you're dealing
Sure,
with something like
sure.
this, I'm an investigator. I want to know what it's going to do
Yeah.
and what this stuff is capable of, because it was showing me it was pretty strange stuff.
Mhm.
When I snapped it, it got shorter and shorter, and it ended up going in like a snake going into a hole, that where it was wiggling going
Mm.
in. It was just crazy, and I wouldn't have talked about this on television years ago. When I wrote my book, Living the Promises, I found God in desperation.
Uh-huh.
That's where Living the Promises came in.
Yes.
When I wrote Living the Promises, I didn't mention the disease.
Uh-huh.
I said I had a nightmare of a
Yes.
story that I was going to
Uh-huh.
keep quiet. You know, I
Right.
was not going to mention, because
Right.
people would have thought I was nuts.
Sure.
And at that time, Bill, that was in 2005, I did not know Morgellons existed.
Mhm.
I thought I was an only victim. I
Right,
thought I was
right.
the only one. After I wrote this, the Living the Promises book,
Mhm.
years later, people who had called me crazy, said I was nuts, but yet they saw it,
Mhm.
called me and said, you're not going to believe this. There's other people who have that same stuff you guys had, that you and Ashley, your
Yeah.
family had, you know, years ago. Didn't you get rid of it? Well, yeah, well, there's people, it's called Morgellons disease, and you need to contact these people because you got rid of it, didn't you?
Yeah.
You know, you might be able to help them.
Mhm.
And I mean, I started trembling the minute I heard that phone call, because I had put it in a Pandora's box. so many years ago, it was 16 years later, that I had just, set it aside. I got healed. I found my answers. But then as I'm sitting back, listening to these people saying, you need to go on the internet and check this out.
Yeah.
And they wrote down the websites and sent me to them. I didn't go looking for Morgellons to bring it back up
Right,
20 years later,
right.
or 18 years later.
Yeah.
They were calling me at a couple of different times. I had phone calls contacting me to let them know, to call these people or contact them with my evidence, because there was, at that time, there was over 12,000 people that were registered with the Center of Disease Control who had the disease. When I went on that internet, I went on that website, Bill, I saw the same thing that I just told you with other people. Over 12,000 families were suffering and showing those same pictures and videos of the things that I
And you still hadn't written your book yet.
I still had not written my book.
Yeah.
And I when I saw those things, this stuff is, oh my God, I hit that off button on that computer so fast. I said, I don't even want to go back there, because I didn't want to go back to the torment that I left behind from that disease. I was tormented. 2 years later, the things I was telling you about was in the first couple of months. 2 years later, I was a basket case, and I just wanted it gone.
Yes,
I
yes.
wanted to leave it out of my world, and I didn't know anybody else suffered with it, so I just left it behind. I walked away from it. So when I contacted the Center of Disease Control and started looking at their videos, I saw what I experienced, and it brought back those horrible memories, and I was scared to death. Not only for what I had, to go back there, but to see the people that were suffering from it, and knowing that they were still suffering. And everywhere I looked, it said they don't know the causative agent, and there is no cure. Now, when you've got 12,000 people registered with the Center of Disease Control, and they have no answers, and I don't have it anymore, for 16 years I've been healed, or 15 years I've been healed, how can you not go back there? How can you not open it up and say, what did I find that they can't?
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was, what did I find, and how did I get healed when nobody else is? Okay? At that point, that was in 2006, there was no answers out there. There was very few people that got healed, and they were using a cream or an ointment, and they were recommending these things. I know I tried every one of them, and I never got healed from those medications that there was nothing that was healing mine at that point. So when I started researching the Morgellons, and I clicked off that computer, a week later, my sister called me and said, Carrie, you're not going to believe this. That disease you guys had, or that stuff you guys had in your skin, she said, it's on the news. I wrote down the website, and she's, telling me about it. And so this was the second call I got, a couple of weeks apart.
Yeah.
So I went online and looked at it again, and I said, how can I not help? How can I not tell my story? And I got to thinking, I'm one of these people who keeps record of everything. I went to my files, and I pulled it. I reached in the back and pulled out water problem, and I pulled out the file that had all of my documented evidence of my whole thing, everything I went through, every doctor report, every attorney thing, every lab test I had done. I had all of those documents, and I ended up putting them in the book for other people to research and find answers, to see what I went through, what I experienced, the places I went. So, and a lot of areas in this, the documents, the legal documents, actually tell the story, other than the horrifying parts of it, and how it destroyed my family. It ripped my world apart. It destroyed my family. When I found out my daughter had it, that was when my stomach turned. My stomach flipped. I couldn't believe that my daughter had it. It scared me. There were some of the labs that I had tests done where they do skin scrapings, and the results would come back with unidentifiable synthetic fibers, and asbestos could be a culprit,
They were saying synthetic.
Synthetic.
Even though it obviously wasn't.
Right. Well, in the research today, I want to jump forward to today. Today, there's still the FBI, Tulsa, Oklahoma FBI research laboratories. They're for the federal government says that there is no substance in the FBI national database that matches the fibers that they're finding in those people's skin. They cannot find a match. And they, at the laboratory, even said, this is some strange stuff. It does not match anything in the FBI's national database for a fiber. Why are they still calling it fibers in their research? Center of Disease Control and the Morgellons Research Foundation, they're still indicating that they're fibers. Well, they look like fibers because they come out like long hairs. But anyways, I ended up finding answers back in 1993. This happened in 1992, early 1992. And it was 94 when I finally got healed of this disease, and I never looked back. 2006 was when I wrote the book, and it was because people were contacting me saying, that stuff you had, what did you do to get rid of it? I found my water heater was contaminated.
Right.
The water in my house, I moved, I emptied, I took everything out of the house, the water heaters, water softeners, everything, and got rid of all those things, put in new, and I moved, sold the house, moved.
Yeah.
Now, after I had written the book, or as I was writing the book, I went back to that home and talked to the people that bought the home, and the lady sat there, she welcomed me in. I told her I used to own the house, and I asked her if she had by chance had any new health issues since she's been living in that house. And she said, why? And I said, well, I'm talking about like anything with your skin or anything like that. And she said, well, I was diagnosed with eczema. And as I got talking to her, she invited me in, gave me a cup of coffee, and we chatted. She called her husband upstairs, and as we were chatting, she finally said, when I told her about my skin disease, she said, it didn't look like this, did it? And she pulled up her sleeve, Bill, and she had it. She had the rashes. Now, I don't know if it was different with her. I found a lot of things in my looking at it and examining this stuff through, having in my body, that it responded to different things differently. Temperature. It would, if you put moisture, if I put lotion on my hands and rubbed it in and went like that, they would start coming out. I could hold them out like this, and they would just start coming out in different places.
Now, did she have Morgellons? Or you don't know?
She had rashes that looked like mine did.
Okay.
Now, whether, I'm not gonna say it was Morgellons, but they had diagnosed her with what did I call it?
Eczema?
Eczema. And so, which is a skin disease.
Right. Right.
Now, on my book, as I started doing my research when I was writing this book, I found that all of those things they have similarities to, to the Morgellons disease. Now, if we're all dealing with some type of something similar that's causing us to have problems, I don't know, I'm not the scientist, but what I do know is that the Morgellons disease, if people have those fibers or those things coming out of their skin and out of their body, it's tormenting. It is very tormenting. There is a way to get rid of it. I did a lot of research. When I found my answers, I never looked back. Mine were gone overnight, and there was a lot of internal damage, that different health issues, which you have I have the question mark on there with all the little, the list of things.
I see that,
Well, I had developed all of those. Just in that short time of having that disease, I had developed several other health issues.
Now, is there anybody in the world who is specialized in this disease or knows more than anyone? Or
no,
like the
there
Center for
are a
Disease
few
Control?
doctors that are popping up that are believing in it and realizing that it's real. And I wanted to, I did pull up something tonight before I came on the show. First thing I went to, I just typed in on your search engines, Morgellons.org. It's MORGELLONS.org, and it says Morgellons disease, the Morgellons Research Foundation. And Morgellons Research Foundation, Morgellons is an unexplained and debilitating condition that has emerged as a public health concern. Recently, the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, has received an increased number of inquiries from the health public health, care providers, public health officials, Congress, and the media regarding this condition. The current number of registered families is 14,720. I met at least 40 people that aren't registered that have Morgellons disease, that have the same symptoms.
So there are a lot more.
How many more are
A lot
there?
more.
Okay, so, and it says, continue reading, it's like, most individuals with Morgellons disease report disturbing crawling, stinging, and biting sensations, as well as non-healing skin lesions, which are associated with highly unusual structures. Frequently asked questions. What is Morgellons disease? Where is the name Morgellons come from? This goes on and on. Symptoms, Morgellons disease symptoms. Symptoms, these structures can be described as fiber-like or filamentous and are the most striking feature of this disease. In addition, patents report that the presence of seed-like, granule, and black specks-like materials associated with their skin. I had those. I described them
Well,
in my
I'll
book.
tell you what, we're gonna post this on YouTube, and we'll put that website up so people can look at it.
Okay.
I think that would be valuable
Oh,
for
yeah.
people to see.
Says below shows fibers emerging from a lesion on a child's lip at 2,000 times.
Good, we'll put up that
And that,
website.
when you look
Yeah.
at that picture, Bill, and when I saw this, it looks like like a creature, like a snake
Sure.
type creature with fangs.
And all the
That's it,
specialists
magnified
at
at
the Center
200.
for Disease
Now,
Control
and
can't
this is
seem to,
them saying,
Yeah.
and they've got a picture of a creature
yeah.
coming out with fangs. Now, what are these things? And they have pictures of them that are fiber-like. They also, the granules, the specks they talk about, there was white ones that look like little fuzz, you know, that would come out of your skin. There was also
Yeah.
black specks. There was at least 12 different types of things that would come out of your skin from this
Yeah.
disease. Now, whether those were the eggs, I don't know. But
Well,
it was a strange,
It's obvious
Strange
that the
stuff.
doctors out there now were never trained in this, and they probably don't have a clue as to what it is.
listen to this.
Uh-huh.
The Morgellons Research Foundation has received registrations from people reporting this condition from all 50 states. The Morgellons Research Foundation has also received registrations from people reporting this condition from 45 other countries. Most notably Canada, Australia, England, South Africa, and the Netherlands. Now, this is a real deal.
I suspect too that in the past, people had to suffer this quietly and
There
just not,
was, the
not having any
history-
answers.
When I started
Yeah.
doing the research, it goes back to, what was it, 1800s? There was a doctor's reports that described something like this in
I
a
would
patient.
suspect this probably goes
Yeah.
back to antiquity, but people just didn't know what it was and they couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, but this
It's
is
amazing.
a real deal. It's
That's-
a real disease, and the world needs to be aware of it. That's why the book is called Awareness, and it's
Awareness.
subtitled Morgellons disease, because I talk about this in the book, that the things that we're not aware of that are destroying us.
Well, Carrie, we're gonna put this on YouTube, and we'll have the links to buy the book and also for the information that you
Right.
talked about, and we can continue this the next show if you want to.
I would
Because
love
this
to.
is a very,
This is-
very deep subject.
This has been on Dr. Phil. He had a
Oh,
patient
he
there
did?
on Dr. Phil. It's
Okay.
also been on Unexplained Mysteries.
Okay,
So, and it's a mystery.
All
but
right.
It's real.
well, we'll see you next week then. This is Bill Lindeman with Carrie Sluter, Believers Business Center Show, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.